Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic. It's Thursday, and that means it's EDH Commander Thursday, and in today's video, community, well, we need to have a talk. And we need to have a talk about Lazav, Dimir Mastermind, some revisions, and why is he so hated? What's up, MTG BC? Here we are. We are about to talk about the deck that we put together, the commander that you selected, Lazav, Dimir Mastermind, and we're going to talk about how our mill build, well, pretty much how it performed. We were fortunate enough to give the deck as it was a good test run. 15 games is a pretty good amount of, play testing. And, well, 2-13. 2-13. Now, the statistics of, the win-loss percentage there may be a little misleading, and there's a couple of extemporaneous factors and confounding variables that we're going to talk about as the reason why we were in so many losing matches. First off, apparently, and this is, probably not newsworthy to anyone in the community, but from a metagame specific standpoint, people hate to mill their cards, and I was pretty much arch-enemied in nearly every single game. I was getting one shot constantly. We had no answers for Blightsteel Colossus, and that was a problem. We hurt ourselves a couple of times. We were in complete control of the game, on our way to win, and then cast Windfall, and that came back to bite us by putting cards into our opponent's hand that ended up killing us. So we have to make a few overhauls here. We're going to turn over about a fifth of the deck, and I've isolated the cards that are problematic, the areas that need improvement, and I think we're going to make this deck even better. This is now going to turn into, we have to make this deck with the purposes of arch enemy in mind. We were targeted relentlessly. We were pretty much, in the majority of the games, the first one eliminated. So apparently, and again, not newsworthy to the community, but people don't like to mill their cards. So, problem number one. Lazav has a mana cost of 2 blue and 2 black. And we want to be able to curve him out into play as soon as possible. So we have to take a look at our mana base, and we have to eliminate any cards that are going to, from a land perspective, hinder us in trying to get blue, blue, black, black within those first few turns. So cards that are going to be eliminated from the deck. The first 6 are lands. Coming out, Nephalia Drownyard. It gives us a colorless. It helps to do a little bit of milling. It's not good enough. It's got to come out. We need lands that give us the colored mana. Myriad Landscape comes into play tapped, too slow. We need lands that come into play untapped, or lands that when they enter the battlefield tapped have a bigger purpose, a better benefit than just searching up 2 by investing 2 mana and sacrificing this. Too slow. We need to be quicker. We're not in ramp colors, so we have to find a way in which to replace a Myriad Landscape with some colored mana that's going to be more helpful and beneficial to what we're doing. Because of our disdain for having the lands come into play tapped, Port of Carful, it's coming out as well. I did enjoy the fact that this is one of the few of these tap land abilities from Kaldheim, from Kaldheim, that allowed us to activate it and sacrifice it without it being sorcery speed. The majority of the others, they say you can only do this as a sorcery. However, it coming into play tapped, we got to try to minimize our tap lands coming into play, particularly if it's only giving us no colors or 1 color. Same thing, Mystic Sanctuary, it is coming out. We could not get 3 islands, and it was just a land coming into play tapped, and we can't have that happen. Mystic Sanctuary out. Also out is going to be 1 basic island and 1 basic swamp. Now those are coming out in order to make room for 2 lands that are able to produce blue or black. So now let's take a look at the lands that we're adding and taking these 6 out, again, with the purposes of trying to create a mana base that can offer us blue, blue, black, black as soon as possible. This, well, aside from the island and the swamp, of course, those 4 lands were not doing it. Here are the lands that are going in the place of these 6 lands. A Dreadship Reef. It only taps for a colorless, but we do have the ability to put storage counters on it. And the storage counters will be very, very helpful both in the very early game and in the mid to long game too. And tapping to remove those storage counters, this is a much more valuable land cycle than a lot of people give it credit for. So Dreadship Reef is going in for its ability to store up the blue and black mana that we're going to need throughout the game. Also going into, we're putting a Watery Grave in. We'll pay 2 life for it to come into play untapped. That's not going to be a problem. And the initial deck building, of this deck, I thought we could have maybe gotten away without including a Shockland because we were just doing a 2-color deck. But with our with the mana value of our commander being a little intensive based on blue, blue, black, black, we're going to have to go with as many dual color lands as we possibly can. So if we've got the check, here comes the pain. If we've got the shock land, here comes the pain land, the Underground River. It can tap for a colorless, but if we need it, we can take a point of damage and give us a blue or a black. So that's going in. River of Tears is going in. It taps for a blue, but if we had a land come into play, we tap for a black instead. So there's a little bit of trickeration here with River of Tears, but it is versatile enough to give us any of the colors that we need if we have to play around it. I still believe that this is a better land than Mystic Sanctuary, Port of Carful, Myriad Landscape, or Nephalia Drownyard. So River of Tears is in to help replace those first 4 lands. And the next 2 lands that are going in to replace an island and a swamp, we're going to include a copy of Choked Estuary. Now, it's going to be my hope that we're going to have minimally at least an island or a swamp in our hand so that we can reveal the island or swamp so that the Choked Estuary comes into play untapped. If we are unable to do that, all right, so we're playing a tapped land. At least we're getting the blue and black needed. That did not give, that Nephalia Drownyard doesn't give us, that Myriad Landscape does not give us, Port of Carful doesn't, nor does Mystic Sanctuary. So Choked Estuary has a little bit of finagling in order for it to come into play untapped, but it's still a possibility. And the last of the 6 lands is one that will enter the battlefield tapped regardless of what we do. It is Fetid Pools. So it's an island swamp, so it's going to enter the battlefield tapped, but it also has cycling. So if we draw this in the late game, we can always cycle it away if needed. If we get it in the early game, that's fantastic. It goes down as a tap land. We pass the turn, and we count the number of turns that we need to cast Lazav coming up. So Fetid Pools is the only land that's coming into the deck that absolutely will come into play tapped, but the caveat of being able to cycle it, I believe, is enough to warrant the potential risk of it coming into play tapped, unlike Port of Carful, Mystic Sanctuary, and Myriad Landscape. So those are the lands. That's the lands, but we also are going to help the mana base by including a couple more mana rocks. And the mana rocks that we're going to include the Talisman of Dominance. It's a mana value of 2, and similar to the Pain Land of Underground River, it taps for a colorless or it taps for a blue and a black and deals 1 damage to us. Again, we're trying to fix the mana as best we can so that we can get Lazav into play as quickly as possible. And following suit with mana rocks, we're going to include a Commander Sphere. Now, this is a CMC of 3, which I'm not crazy about, but we're a little limited with what we can add into a Dimir deck. It gives us a blue or it gives us a black, and we can sacrifice it for a card. So being able to sacrifice it for a card offers a greater deal of versatility than some of the other, 3 CMC mana rocks that only tap for any color. The extra card could make a difference. So Commander Sphere is in alongside Talisman of Dominance. Now, for a lot of these revisions, we are going to have to take some of the great strengths of the deck and weaken them slightly in order to build an overall stronger deck. And in so doing, we're going to need to take out some of our mill stuff, both targeted and universal mill. We're also going to have to take out some recursion and some graveyard-centric spells in order to make the overall deck work the way we need it to. Again, we have to enter into the continuation of this deck building process with the idea of arch enemy in mind. So we're going to need to protect ourselves. Here, we're doing a great job of balancing the mana base better. We're taking out some fluff in order to give us more duality in our colors. In order for the Talisman of Dominance and the Commander Sphere to go in, we're going to take out King Narfi's Betrayal, which, honestly, when this is hit or miss. I mean, this is not an absolute. This going into play and only milling 4 cards, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that we're able to get a creature out of the graveyard. I had trouble with this. I mean, there were some decks I sat down to play against that were not playing creature-heavy decks. And this just kind of sat in my hand and really didn't do much. And when I got onto the battlefield, it just wasn't consistent enough. I'd like to be able to do something that's much more consistent or stronger throughout the deck than what King Narfi's Betrayal can allow us to do, particularly because of just the randomization and the time stamped on it too, because we only have 2 turns to utilize this to get a creature, or I'm sorry, we only have as many lore counters as goes on this in order to utilize it. So there's a kind of a ticking time bomb for King Narfi's Betrayal. And in reviewing all the other cards, this one seemed like one of the weakest of the class. So King Narfi's is out in order for a mana rock to go in. And also coming out, again, remember, we have to weaken some of our strengths to make the deck overall even better. And some of that's going to be Graveyard Recursion, like we saw with King Narfi's Betrayal, and like we're going to see with Beacon of Unrest. 3 and 2 black, artifact or creature from any graveyard onto play under our control, and then we shuffle this back into our hand. This one, again, we just have to weaken some of our areas in order to bring in some additional strength. You guys get it. You've been in the deck building process, and I think overall, having better access to blue-black mana through losing 2 of 12 graveyard recursion spells, I think that is going to go a long ways in making the deck a lot more consistent. All right, so now let's take a moment. Let's get the lands and the mana ramp out of here and move on to the next phase of the revisions. Okay, phase 2 of the revisions. Phase 1, we needed to fix the mana. We needed to get better and we needed to get quicker. And I think we did that. We added some great lands that give us both the colors we need and a couple more mana rocks. And we took out a bunch of superfluous lands that weren't helping us very much and a couple of graveyard-specific spells of which we were plentiful. The next area of revision that the deck desperately needed, we need more removal. If we are going to enter into arch enemy type style games whenever we sit down and open up Lazav, we have to expect that we're going to get one shot. And we were getting one shot constantly. We played against, oh my goodness, what was it? We played against, Drazi deck, one shot back to the Stone Age. Blightsteel, we had absolutely no answers for the Blightsteel Colossus. There was a couple of games with Xenaghost where we just had absolutely no answers for that because we were not very strong with removal. That stops now. We are going to add half dozen removal spells to the deck. And again, similar to when we were, fixing the mana of the deck, we are going to slightly weaken some areas of the deck that were otherwise very, very strong in order to strengthen, in this instance, the removal aspect of the deck. All right, so the cards coming out. Manic Scribe's coming out. It was a lot more difficult to hit Delirium than I thought. I never hit it. In all the games I had this in play, I never hit it. This was too slow. It was just not worth a spot in the deck. So it does not hurt me or my feelings at all to see Manic Scribe come out. Same thing with Folio of Fancies. This came back to hurt me. We were playing against, I want to say it was, I don't even remember what the deck was, blue, green, tons of card draw. This in play, no maximum hand size for all players. Again, this is one of those cards that I always have a little bit of angst including in my decks. I don't want to help out opponents. This helped out an opponent in a game so much that the person was able to sit back with like 20, 30 cards in their hand just because of this artifact. And again, we're in Dimir colors, so our artifact removal is non-existent. So Folio of Fancies, you look fancy, but you are coming out. This card, I couldn't wait to take this card out. I cast this card from a spot of strength, and in 2 turns, I was already shuffling up my deck. I don't it's just another one of those cards like Folio of Fancies where I don't like giving my opponents potential resources. And exchanging cards in their hand for new cards did just that and cost me not one game, but cost me 2 games. Windfall's coming out, and with that, there can be no other discussion. That's just it. Nothing. All right, and here we're going to go more for removal of some additional redundancy. So Sphinx's Tutelage is a spell where the top half of text, whenever we draw a card, target opponent puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. I like the fact that it does for, whenever we're drawing a card, we're getting someone to mill. I prefer a global approach to that because it gets more bang for our buck. The bottom ability of 5 and a blue to draw a card and discard a card is that's just unplayable to me. That's just way too much mana to holding up 6 just to draw a card and then discard a card. Additionally, for this particular spell, if both of the cards that are milled are non-land cards that share a color, repeat the process. That never happened one time in all of the games I played with this card. Never happened once. So Sphinx's Tutelage, for a lot of different reasons, is an easy card to remove. Again, we have redundancy throughout the deck with respect to drawing cards and having opponents mill. So losing that aspect is not too bad, particularly with the bottom ability of drawing a card and discarding cards for 6. We're not doing that. And again, repeating the process never happened once. So Sphinx's Tutelage is a good card to remove in order to give ourselves some more protection. A lot of what we said about Sphinx's Tutelage, we can say about Teferi's Tutelage. It's a very similar card. It's same mana value, comes into play. This one lets us draw a card when it ETBs, but then we have to discard a card. And it says whenever we draw a card, target opponent mills 2 cards. Again, I prefer to kind of focus more on the globalization of the milling, so I'm not just selecting one opponent, because like I said earlier, sometimes opponents had barely any creatures, sometimes it was a complete tribal deck. I want to be able to hit all of the opponents at the same time, and that's why we're kind of focusing on trying to eliminate some of the targeted opponent mill spells. So having Teferi's Tutelage come out, again, is not going to weaken the deck very much because we have other redundancy in the deck that does that exact same thing. Spell 6 that's coming out in order to make room for the new half dozen removal spells. Thief of Sanity is coming out. This is a good card. It really is. However, for the purposes of what we're trying to do in this deck, it's just a little slow. I mean, I know it's only a mana value of 3. It does have flying, so there is that evasion. But more often than not, I had to hold this back for blocking because the deck was under-equipped to deal with the spotlight of an archenemy style game. So maybe sometime in the future when the deck can stabilize and take on a table without that much of resource expenditure, perhaps we can revisit re-including Thief of Insanity into the 99, but for right now, the deck's purposes are better served with this creature coming out in order to make room for a removal spell. All right, so those are the 6 spells coming out. Here are the 6 removal spells going in. Pongify is going in. We have Rapid Hybridization in the deck. I thought that would have been enough, but again, I either misjudged or just didn't realize and wasn't mindful enough to how much people don't like to mill their libraries. So Pongify is going in, and for some reason, blue gets to destroy a creature for 1 mana, and in this deck, that's going to be A-okay in my book. Yeah, they get a 3/3 green ape, but I'm fine giving them a token if I'm getting rid of something much worse, and Pongify is going to have a spot right next to Rapid Hybridization and help me do that. Next up, we are going to include a copy of Murderous Rider. This was a perfect creature to kind of complement the departure of Thief of Sanity, because we get 2 spells in 1. We get to destroy a target creature or a planeswalker. Yeah, we lose 2 life, but I mean, in a game of Commander, that's not a burden by any stretch of the imagination. And we can do that for the same cost as we can do that for the same cost of casting this as the creature spell. So it's 1 and 2 black to destroy. It's 1 and 2 black to put the 2/3 lifelinker into play. And again, I think this is going to do a lot more. This is going to be a lot better in our deck just because of the versatility it presents. We can off a creature. The Planeswalker, I don't recall there being many or any Planeswalkers at all in any of the games I played. I might just not remember. because I was in shell shock mode. But I still think adding in this is going to be a very good spell because it is removal and then a creature. And that's just going to help us out with the deck more. Another removal spell, we're going to include Poison the Cup. Now, this is destroy target creature, 1 and 2 black, so this is a murder. However, if we foretell this, we can, cast 2, put it aside, and then sometime later in the game, we can cast 1 and we can tap for 1 and a black and destroy target creature. And if we do it that way, we can scry 2. So again, we're adding some additional versatility. Again, we're most likely always going to foretell this if we are able to do that. And again, similar to Murderous Rider, we are kind of injecting more versatility and more removal at the same time. So hopefully with the ability to scry, it helps to make up for some of the loss of the card advantage that we see here with Folio of Fancies and Windfall. Not the same thing, I get that, so don't light me up in the comment section, but still, scrying 2 is not a bad thing at all. Now, you know that I said earlier that we had absolutely no answers for Blightsteel Colossus. We did not. The recoil helped for 1 turn, but that was it. So not all of our removal spells are going to be destroy creature spells. I mean, for what we have here in Lazav, we want creatures hitting the graveyard. However, we also have to understand that we have to protect ourselves. So not every creature or not every removal spell going into this deck is going to be a destroy creature spell. This is going to be an exile creature spell. Baleful Mastery, 3 and a black, exile target creature or planeswalker. Again, the 2 walls of text before that, I don't see me ever doing that. If we pay 1 and a black to cast this spell, an opponent draws a card, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to help out an opponent outside of there being some kind of proposition for a deal. And even at that point, I generally don't enter into deals like that. So in our world, this is 3 and a black to exile target Blightsteel Colossus. And again, that guy was the bane of my existence during those games. I couldn't even mill the opponent because it just kept going to the library or going to the graveyard and then going right back to their hand. It was going into the graveyard, then right back into their library. So it was just a mess. All right, next, with that in mind and staying on theme with Baleful Mastery, we are also going to include a copy of Eat to Extinction. 3 and a black at instant speed again, exile target creature or planeswalker again, and then we can look at the top card of our library, and we may put that into our graveyard. So this, again, gives us a little bit of versatility because if we don't like what we see, we put it into the graveyard and hope the next card will be better suited to what we need at that time. Exile spell going in. And our last kind of spot removal or slash removal, because we got more removal coming up, folks. Yeah, we're bringing heavy with the removal. Zot's Will, 4 and a black. Instant speed, we can pick one, but if we have Lazav in play, we can choose both. So each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power, or we exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards and then create X01 Black Thrall creature tokens where X is the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way. Hopefully we'll get the ability to cast both of these parts of the spell because I believe it would be most beneficial. However, if we had to pick just the one, it's most likely going to be each opponent sacrificing a creature where they control the greatest power. There were some big ones out there and we were just consistently getting one shot. Optimally, we can have them each sacrifice and then exile their graveyards, give us a bunch of chump blocking black thralls that can help us do what we need to do to secure victory. But I think Zot's Will is going to do a lot of heavy lifting in this deck. All right, we are just about done here. We've got a couple more removal spells and then a few more spells to accentuate the deck. All right, so coming out is going to be Decree of Pain. The 8 CMC was high. I was never able to cast that. Now, granted, we added a few additional, we got a couple more mana rocks in here, some higher CMC spells coming out. So we will see if taking out Decree of Pain might be a mistake, and then maybe it's something that we can put back into the deck at a later time. However, I came across a mass removal spell that will definitely be better, and it is a slightly cheaper in mana value than Decree of Pain is. Because Decree of Pain reads, we're destroying all creatures. So if we have Lazav in play, we definitely don't want to lose him. So we don't want to cast the Decree of Pain unless it's absolutely necessary. However, there was a removal spell that I came across that I think is actually a better form of Decree of Pain. Granted, it's not going to draw us any cards. However, we won't necessarily lose our commander either, and that's going to be Necromantic Selection. For 4 and 3 black, which is one mana less than what Decree of Pain is, we do destroy all creatures, but then we return a creature card put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under our control. So if we have Lazav in play, we can return him from the graveyard if needed, which is a benefit that Decree of Pain does not allow us to have, does not afford us. Granted, we're not drawing the cards, but that's not really the purpose here. The purpose here is we need to remove creatures from the battlefield and try to keep our commander there. Necromantic Selection will do that. Decree of Pain won't. And hey, maybe there's a creature even better than Lazav that goes to the graveyard, and we can gank that for a few turns with Necromantic Selection. Alright, so coming out again is going to be another Graveyard Recursion spell so that we can add another form of removal. We're going to bring out the Sepulchral Primordial. Again, we've got other redundancy in the deck, so we're taking a strength, slightly weakening it to make one of our weaknesses even stronger. Well, not to make our weaknesses stronger, but to make a weak part of our deck better. And for that, we're going to include a copy of Avatar of Woe. 6 and 2 black. However, if there are 10 or more creature cards total in all graveyards, we're only going to cast this for 2 black. That will not be a difficult feat in most games. I highlight in most games because, again, if you come across a couple of Spellslinger decks, it's going to be a tough day for Lazav. 6/5 with Fear, tap, destroy target creature, it can't be regenerated. Avatar of Woe, I think, is going to do a lot more for us in this deck than the Sepulchral Primordial ever could have. So Avatar of Woe in, the Primordial is coming out. Alright, we're down to our last few spells. Next up, we're going to include a little bit more protection, but a little bit more haste too. We want to put in a copy of Lightning Greaves. Not having the haste has been a problem. I mean, we're in blue-black, so we're not really going to have the purposes of haste anyways. However, when we not unearth the ability, but when we recur a creature card from an opponent's graveyard, giving it haste and shroud, that's wonderful with the Lightning Greaves, plus having Lazav come into play, even though it already has hexproof, slapping on a Lightning Greaves to give it haste, that's going to be a lot more beneficial to the deck as well. So with Lightning Greaves coming out, we're going to take out Rexiel, the Risen Deep. 6 CMC spell. Again, it's more graveyard centric, but again, we have the redundancy, so we can weaken this a little bit to make the deck overall better. Alright, next card to come out is going to be Mind Funeral. It's one of those target opponent mill spells, target opponent specific target opponent mill spell. That's going to come out to make room for one that targets each opponent with greater frequency of cards going into the graveyard, and that's going to be Fractured Sanity. Triple blue, each opponent mills 14 cards, and we can also cycle it if needed. So that's going to be a much bigger improvement than what Mind Funeral was offering us. Last but not least, the last change is going to be Diluvian Primordial is coming out. Again, we're weakening a little bit our graveyard interaction. However, to take out the Diluvian Primordial to include Bruvak, the Grandiloquent, if an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead. I think it's going to be difficult to not say that's an improvement overall with the deck. Alright, MTG Burgeoning community, that is Lazav Dimir Mastermind. Let me know what you think in the comment section below.